Recording is in progress.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. And so welcome to the Indigenous Global Unity Summit, IGU Summit Week 77, where we will hopefully be having our guest speaker coming on our call in a short while. But first, I do like to start by saying land acknowledgement. So we begin today by acknowledging that those that walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of this land. We're grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources. We are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on here in the Greater Toronto Area is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, and is now home to many diverse peoples. We like to acknowledge the land we're on here is at the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the First Nations of the Williams Treaty. We thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us, and acknowledge and recognize all of the world's Indigenous peoples as stewards of Mother Earth. I do also like to say Sawubona, which means I see you, I see myself in you, and I see your hopes, your dreams, and your struggles. I also see your ancestors. Because interconnectedness does not end with two people who are greeting each other, it extends to include the ancestors. Where all beings and Mother Nature are interconnected, there is no sense of being separate. Because I see myself in all beings, and therefore if I harm other beings or Mother Nature, it translates into harming myself. Before we get going, again, we're waiting for our guest speaker. His name is Magic. He should be coming on our call shortly, but I do like to say as well the events that are coming up. So today is Thursday, November 24th, 2022. Again, week 77 of the IGU Summit series. Today is not a particularly special day in the UN calendar. However, one observance that I did not mention last week was that just last Saturday was World Toilet Day, November 19th. This will be important for us moving forward as we begin to promote other types of Unity Garden solutions, specifically the Wheel of Life Farm and or Wall Farm, Wall Farm School Solutions, developed by Dr. Paul Olivier, who's an expert in waste management. So you'll see in the chat, there are some links as well to World Toilet Day, which is an official UN international observance every 19th of November. It's intended to inspire action to tackle the global sanitation crisis, where worldwide it's estimated 4.2 billion people live without safely managed sanitation, and around 673 million people practice open defecation. There's also a link to an organization or the organizational website, worldtoiletday.info, and as well a link to SDG Target 6.2, which is related to sanitation and hygiene from the World Health Organization, which notes that by 2030, they wish to achieve access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all, and end open defecation, paying special attention to the needs of women and girls and those in vulnerable situations. Also, last Sunday was actually as well Africa Industrialization Day, November 20th, where we in UnityNet are promoting sustainable and regenerative and green or circular economy industrialization, of course. And November 20th also happened to be World Children's Day. And there is good alignment, especially given Africa is and will remain the youngest continent for some time into the future. So there are some links as well to the website for the UN Africa Industrialization Day as well.
Excuse me, Lloyd. Lisa Anise is trying to get your attention to let
I just wanted to let you know that our guest speaker is here.
Although I don't see his ability to have an audio. So Magic, could you unmute yourself to make sure we can hear you, Magic? no, we don't see the audio for you. So while Lloyd continues, perhaps you could adjust your audio or go out and come back in. Back to you, Lloyd.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for that notice. As well, in the chat, you'll find a report about economic development in Africa that was issued this year. As well, I am putting some information about World Children's Day, November 20th, an important date, as it is the date in 1959 when the UN General Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of the Child, where World Children's Day 2022 was Sunday, 20th of November, an international observance, not a public holiday, but all UN member countries celebrate Children's Day according to their own specified dates. So as well, there's a link to website for UNICEF, which is of course promoting World Children's Day as well, as a day of action for children by children, from climate change, education, and mental health to ending racism, discrimination. Children and young people are raising their voices on the issues that matter. So the campaign for 2022 was inclusion for every child, with the hashtag World Children's Day and I felt included. And so this information again in the chat for those who wish to have this available to find out more information. There's a link to the Wikipedia page and the related African Union Youth Volunteer Corps, which notes that if we go to the website in the chat, you can become an African Union Youth Volunteer. So tomorrow as well is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So Friday, November 25th. And on this day, the UN General Assembly had designated November 25th as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, with the premise to raise awareness around the world that women are subjected to rape, domestic violence, and other forms of violence. And there are several hashtags that they use: End Violence Against Women, NGV, Strong Men Don't Fight Women, and We Love Our Women. So the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women marks the launch of the UNITE campaign from November 25th to December 10th, an initiative of 16 days of activism concluding on the day that commemorates the International Human Rights Day, which is the 10th of December. So there is a link to the UN Women website and their campaign led around UN Secretary General and UN Women, been ongoing since 2008. And they aim to prevent and eliminate violence against women and girls around the world, calling for global action to increase awareness, promote advocacy, and create opportunities for discussion on challenges and solutions. And so this year's campaign is called Unite Activism to End Violence Against Women and Girls, and aims to mobilize all of society to become activists for the prevention of violence against women, to stand in solidarity with women's rights activists, support feminist movements around the world, and resist the rollback on women's rights, and calling for a world free from what they say called VAWG. So the focus of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which started November 18th, runs through International Human Rights Day on 10th of November. So again, UN Women also has a YouTube channel or UN Web on UN Web TV as well. So I don't know if our guest speaker is ready, if he's able to unmute himself and have some voice. I do have more events that I could mention, but they are events that I have mentioned in the past during our previous IGU summits as well.
So perhaps then we can see if Magic could unmute himself to see if the audio is available. Magic, are you there? And did he perhaps provide you with a PDF presentation, Lloyd, in the event that he has audio difficulties?
Mhm. Okay, I'm gonna have to go get his presentation. Let's see. Uh-oh, I don't remember where I saved it to. Give me a second here. Apologies. So we go to South Africa. Okay, I'm opening the presentation now. Give me 1 second to open the presentation and share it here. Okay. Okay, now share.
He does ask if Lawrence can present in the event that he's unable to regain his control. Floyd. So Lawrence, are you able to unmute yourself? Can you let us know we can hear you? Are you there, Lloyd? I'm sorry, Lawrence. Oh, he's coming back in. Lawrence Villa is his name, Lloyd, just to let you know.
Yeah, Lawrence Billa was the person that we were working with also to organize this event with Magic intending to do the actual presentation.
Excellent. I think he's maybe in now.
I don't see, I don't have the ability to ask if he can unmute.
Oh, normally you ask not to make co-host because you're doing presentations, but
Yep.
everyone can. I'll ask them to unmute.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Yes, here in the chat, what Magic has stated, my apologies. I'm struggling to connect with my laptop. I'm using my phone and not getting any audio. Still fiddling around, but if I fail, can Lawrence please present? Who is?
Yes, and Lawrence is now open up his audio. Lawrence, can you speak to make sure we hear you? Your mic is open on this side, but we don't hear you yet.
Hence are the trials and tribulations of attempting to connect from
Well,
halfway around the world.
I've been explaining to everyone that the internet is like a child. It only fortifies connections that it makes on a regular basis. So the more often we make these connections, the easier they become.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant learning machine, the internet. That's why everybody's so afraid of when the internet learns everything about us.
So, Lawrence, of course, your other option is for you yourself to actually go through the presentation and read each page as a last resort.
Mm-hmm. So Magic, are you able to try to see if we can hear you? We do see your video.
Yeah, I have no microphone listed for him and Sumana. Lawrence seems to be doing okay, but there is a question about how much of the cloud he's able to access.
Lawrence, Could you at least perhaps indicate that you are hearing us,
You mean in the chat?
perhaps in the chat, or maybe he could put up his hand or something?
I think you have to be more specific. I heard someone, but I don't know who it was.
Okay, I was just saying I can hear you guys.
Okay, excellent. Laurence, we are hearing you. Is it possible, Laurence, that you can do the presentation yourself if Magic is unable to unmute and get audio? So you had sound some earlier, Laurence.
It doesn't
Are you
look like
having
it doesn't look like
additional?
yeah, it doesn't look like it's continuous of what he's getting, or at least from what he had to say.
Mhm.
Or at least the way he said what he did say when he was able to say something.
Yes, thank you.
So intermittency seems to be the issue here.
And the other question again, Lloyd, is can you scroll through the presentation to see if it's a presentation that just can be read so that we all understand it or not?
Well, I could begin at least to read whatever is on the screen. We are seeing here One-Stop Disability Services, SAS, 24-hour day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, Disability Experts Consortium that is promoting social integration, skills development, and economic empowerment. So it looks like this is their opening screen. So I will go to the next page. So the next page says disability in South Africa, where South Africans with disabilities constitute a sizable proportion of the population, and their status in society is extremely varied in a developing nation with socioeconomic inequality and a history of apartheid, where wealthy city dwellers have access to a wide range of assistance, whereas the poor struggle for even the basic necessities of life. Where on this page they talk about the demographics, where according to a 2014 report by Statistics South Africa, based on the 2011 census, about 7.5% of the country's population is regarded as having a disability, where the highest proportion of people with disabilities by province was found to be in the Free State, with about 11.1% of its population having a disability, followed by the Northern Cape, the Northwest, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu, Natal, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, the Western Cape, and Gauteng.
Nothing.
So the demographics, slide 2 says in his presentation, the statistician general Palilelahola said that mining could contribute to the high prevalence of people with disabilities in the Free State, Northern Cape, Northwest, and Eastern Cape. And according to Leholola, a significant number of South Africa's mine workers originate from these provinces, where legislation and government policy says South Africa is a party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or the CRPD, as well as the optional protocol on the rights of persons with disabilities, which was signed on the 30th of March 2007 and ratified in that same year in November. So the National Constitution's Chapter 2 says A Bill of Rights explicitly prohibits unfair discrimination against people on the basis of disability or health status. And the 1997 Integrated National Disability Strategy, or INDS, white paper set out a variety of government policy positions on disability, where the legislation and government policy is around the 1997 Office of the Status of Disabled Persons, or OSDP, which was established in the Office of the Deputy President. So from 2009 to 2014, a Ministry and Department of Women, Children, and Persons with Disabilities existed, and its disability program was criticized in Parliament for underperformance and inefficiency. So when the Ministry and Department were abolished in 2014, the responsibility for matters relating to disability passed to the Department of Social Development. However, this move was criticized by people with disabilities. So the Department of Social Development's 2015 white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities updated and supplemented the 1997 INDS by integrating the provisions of the CRPD and its optional protocol, where after numerous complaints and uproar about disability being located in the Department of Social Development, the Department of Women in the Presidency was reconstituted as the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, which is one of the most useless departments in the whole cabinet, even for women and youth in general, noting how persons with disabilities are mentioned last as an afterthought. It lacks capacity and resources to implement any tangible programs, pretending to be doing something for people with disabilities during Disability Month, which is from the 3rd of November to the 3rd of December, where the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities claims they're waiting for a Disability Act to implement programs that can benefit people with disabilities in both the public and the private sectors. So the struggle for people with disabilities in South Africa has taken about 28 steps backward, quote unquote, mainly by some of their own. There's a serious vacuum in leadership, with some absorbed in Parliament and government, as well as related institutions, who have forgotten where they came from. Some, or about 40 member teams, are serving in the ineffective and inefficient so-called Presidential Working Group on Persons with Disabilities, or the PWGPD. And on the flip side, South Africa's sign language, SASL, is about to become the 12th official language, where previously there used to be an umbrella body for organizations for and of persons with disabilities who used to speak in one voice through the South African Federal Council on Disability, or SAFCD. It has since been replaced by a more toothless, ineffective South African Disability Alliance, or SADA, which its authors, DPSA, has long deserted. So a wide range of advocacy and self-help organizations exist in South Africa. They range from the overtly political Disabled People South Africa, or DPSA, aligned with the ruling African National Congress, to the single-issue national organizations such as the National Council for and of Persons with Disabilities, the Deaf Federation of South Africa, the South African National Council for the Blind, the South African Federation of Mental Health, Para Association of South Africa, and local self-help groups that advocate for their members. So it is for the above-mentioned reason that persons with disabilities, the Sustainable Socioeconomic Development, or PAST, has now been formed as per below. It passed as part of the Project Ability Experts Consortium, which is led by Tokoto v20221124 Trading and Projects, with Mangazini Lodge in participation to execute the program called AEC 24/7/365 One-Stop Disability Service, or OSAS. where employment equity now exists in legislation, but in practice it falls far short. Where the Employment Equity Act says the Code of Good Practice of Employment of People with Disabilities, the TAG, the Technical Assistance Guidelines on Employment of People with Disabilities is TAG. So employers in both the public and private sector are failing to meet the employment target of 7% in the workplace. This will increase from 2%, where South Africans with disabilities are vastly more likely to be unemployed than the average, where a study published by the University of Johannesburg Center for Social Development, CSDA, in 2014 showed that about 68% of working age South Africans with disabilities had never attempted to seek employment. So the alternative is self-employment, but entrepreneurs with disabilities aren't getting any necessary support, despite the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, or PPFA, calling for 5% of any procurement be given to this sector of the community. So the Department of Social Development, through the South African Social Security Agency, offers qualifying residents income support in the form of disability grants, where the 2014 CSDA study showed that the grant was only received by about 10% of people with disabilities in South Africa. So in 2010, a study published by the University of Johannesburg showed that 61% of people with disabilities living in the 8 poorest wards of Johannesburg were not accessing the state's disability grant due to various reasons, including not knowing that the grant existed. So we're calling for a disability allowance to be received by all people with disabilities to replace this disability grant. So the separate special schools policy of the apartheid era created a system of schools for children with a wide variety of disabilities, with some schools specializing in educating blind, deaf, or intellectually impaired students, while others catered for students with physical disabilities, offering the standard academic curriculum coupled with medical and paramedical services to treat the pupils' impairments. As with the general population, these schools were also racially segregated. The ones for white children were far better resourced than those for other racial groups. So just a second. The South African Paralympic team has consistently finished in the top half of the medal table at every Summer Paralympics game since the country was readmitted after the end of apartheid, and at their readmission in the 1992 Summer Paralympic in Barcelona, the team was ranked 27th by medal tally in 2008, but they reached 6th place, the team's best performance to date. With regard to sport, the notable South African Paralympians included Oscar Pistorius in sprinting, Natalie de Toux in swimming, Ernst van Dijk, wheelchair racing, and hand cycling, current record holder of 10 wins at the Boston Marathon, along with Kugothatso Montjane in wheelchair tennis as well. So there is also the Deaf Olympics. South Africa has been participating at the Deaf Olympics regularly from 1993. Deaf swimmer and Olympic silver medalist Terence Parkin won the most number of medals at the Deaf Olympics history with a tally of 33. Other sports, noting the presentation, does not include statistics on children under the age of 5 or on persons with psychological and certain neurological disabilities due to data limitations. Should therefore not be used for purposes of describing the overall disability prevalence or profile of persons with disabilities in South Africa. So there are on this page a number of references to, for instance, the Census 2011, the 2.9 million South Africans are disabled statistics, as well as a number of other ones here, including for the Minister and Department of Women, Children, and People with Disabilities in its annual report, and articles about President Zuma's concerns and the disability rights 10 steps backwards article in Department of Social Development white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities from the government of South Africa. Additional references here are to the QASA mission and vision, silencing lives of struggle, how disabled peoples South Africa has sacrificed, the politics of protest, and a number of other articles and references to, for instance, disabled parking and how South Africa is failing the disabled, and World Report on Disability from the World Health Organization and South African Social Security agencies, and a number of others as well. Oh, another third page of references that goes into articles around the need for special needs schools and how disabled children face uphill education battles. There's also a study on education for children with disabilities in South Africa, and a report on the implementation of inclusive education in South Africa, and a number of other ones as well regarding the Paralympic team and their outcomes, including the Boston Marathon wins and the World Cup for sight impaired people, which was a win by South Africa as well. So I believe this might be the last page by our One Stop Disability Services members who have been trying to get unmuted and to be doing their presentation for us. I have just read through the presentation as it is. We're hoping to, of course, hear more from their own voices as well. Okay, so there are more pages here. So how to celebrate 24/7, 365 OSAS in the workplace, where they note One Stop Disability Services from November 1st to October 31st is a 24-hour per day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year event meant to observe and promote the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities by Disability Experts Consortium, or AEC. And it will be observed with varying degrees across the country within the public and private sectors next year, again from November 1st to 31st, 2023. The observance will be through different daily, weekly, monthly, and annual themes aimed to promote and understand an understanding of disability issues and mobilize support for the dignity, rights, and well-being of persons with disabilities. It also seeks to increase awareness of gains to be derived from the integration of persons with disabilities in every aspect of political, social, economic, and cultural life. It's called 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, One Stop Disability Services, OSAS. So each day, week, month, year, the focus will be on a different issue as per the attached calendar, which I'm hoping will be shown, but it doesn't look like it might be here. We will hopefully get that from our presenters at a later date. Again, how to celebrate 24/7, 365 OSAS in the workplace. One Stop Disability Services recognize people with disabilities to promote the importance of inclusion in life and the workplace. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year events. OSAS is hosted by AEC, encourages business leaders across the country to value the unique contributions of people with disabilities. In this post, we discover how to celebrate and support employees with disabilities, where it notes a lot of companies make diversity part of their performance goals against which an executive gets paid. Just as you have to make a certain sales number, you have to make a diversity number to get your bonus. This is a note by a gentleman by the name of Berman Jordan So again, some training sessions around the best way to ignite meaningful change in your workplace is to host disability training sessions. Anyone can be affected by a disability, so it's important to ensure all employees understand the importance of accessibility to cultivate an inclusive culture. Where they're noting 5 benefits of disability awareness training include 1, improving customer service, where employees who recognize different conditions will better serve your customers who may have such impairments. 2, learning the legal requirements and reducing the risk of legal implications or unfair treatment by learning about the Employment Equity Act 55 of 1998. This is for South Africa. Number 3, encourage open communication with people with disabilities living with their conditions every day. The training can supply well-being support through open communication. Number 4, transforming perceptions, where we reduce unconscious bias and misinformation through an informative training session, which informs your able-bodied staff. And number 5, validating staff with disabilities, where a training session shows employees with disabilities that their feelings, experiences, and struggles are valid. So recognizing people with disabilities through the disability awareness around the misconceptions and stereotypes surrounding those with disabilities can be brought to the forefront. When these are gone, attitudes and behaviors become more positive and impactful. Digging better to create a better understanding is a powerful way to raise awareness. Where we're now talking about what is disability. Disability is more or any condition of the body or mind or impairment that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities, activity limitation, and interact with the world around them, which is called participation restriction. So there's a note about hiring a speaker. So the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 day a year program, hire a disability awareness speaker whose personal experiences will resonate with your employees. So these inspirational figures overcame physical and mental hurdles to thrive in their disability sector, making for a truly empowering speech at corporate events. I'm seeing Magic is coming back on. I'm not sure if he's able to have any voice at this time, but to ask him to keep trying. But we are going through the presentation for now, so that we have something in our pocket for this presentation, which we may want to try again in the future. So in order to improve accessibility and inclusion in the workplace, several common hurdles can prevent employees with disabilities from performing at their best, from wheelchair ramps to screen readers and braille signage to accessible toilets. It's important to cater to employees of all abilities and consider how your workplace may impact a person with a disability. On the 24-hour a day, 7 day a week, 365 day a year, we want to create an accessible environment for everyone in your team. So here are some examples of accessibility in the workplace, including wheelchair ramps and lifts, quiet rooms for noise sensitivity, braille signage, adaptive desks and chairs, and investments in digital accessibility tools. So making a pledge, it is impossible to solve the world's inequalities for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, including these regular events and activities. So make a meaningful pledge to celebrate diversity, value accessibility, serve your employees with disabilities for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Going forward, learn from the experts, implement genuine changes in your workplace, which benefit your staff with disabilities as well. So this pledge, making a pledge of 5 meaningful pledges. The first, donate to persons with disabilities sustainable socioeconomic development or past programs and foundation and their trust through the AECOSAS's disability portal, I suppose that means. So the strengthen your discrimination policies through AEC's OSAS's disability intervention. Number 3, improve accessibility, example through wheelchair ramps through the AEC OSAS's disability intervention. And 4, assess your employees' diversity through the AEC's OSAS disability intervention program. And finally, make a public statement of support. So here is, not sure what exactly this is. Be good if we knew maybe this is some kind of budget on the different programs.
Well, can Lawrence or Magic perhaps try to unmute themselves? I see Magic is trying to come back in now. Or if not, if you don't understand what it is, then perhaps we go to the next slide.
Again, it looks like this might be either an interlude or the end of the presentation. We will know soon enough when I click one more time. Okay, we are continuing. Persons with disabilities sustainable socioeconomic development past aims to advance the rights and equal opportunities of citizens with disabilities in South Africa. They have several categories of membership, including full members, ordinary members, observer members, and associate members. So their aims and objectives of the past, as defined by the past statutes, include their purpose being the association's mission to ensure persons with disabilities full access to fundamental and human rights through their active involvement in policy development and implementation in South Africa, where the objective is to achieve equalization of opportunities for all women and men with disabilities through influencing the work of all the South African institutions in cooperation with the social and civil partners, institutions, and agencies of South Africa, as well as with other African and international organizations and agencies in accordance with the principle of non-discrimination and in compliance with past mission statement expressed in the first paragraph of the article. So this will be achieved through promoting and systematic monitoring of legislative proposals and strategic campaign work to influence policy and practice throughout Africa, where the activities which the association will undertake to obtain these objectives include contacts with the relevant institutions and consultative bodies of the African continent, preparing and disseminating of position papers, periodic information bulletins, and other written contributions, organization of conferences and seminars and or participation in them, along with cooperation and dialogue with other stakeholders as NGOs, media, trade unions, and employers. So the aims and objectives, page 3 says all these activities will be undertaken by the association on the basis of thorough consultation with its members, where the association shall also defend the interests of its member organizations and of their members' organizations when called upon by them to do so at the African level and through its membership organizations as national level. So the aims and objectives of the past are defined by past statutes again as committing to past aims and objectives being the promotion of persons with disability, human, civil, social, and economic rights, and the equalization of opportunities for all in accordance with principles of non-discrimination, where they fully respect and support human and social rights and equal opportunities for persons with disabilities in all the dimensions of external and internal policies and activities, as well as in working practices, and also respecting past bylaws and internal rules. So finally, we note that they accept all the financial obligations toward past deriving from membership, including engaging in disseminating official information coming from past along to members in our organizations and companies, not attempting to speak on behalf of past or representing the association unless specifically mandated by the relevant governing bodies in writing, as well as not using the membership of past for the promotion of private, commercial, or political interests. So this is a bit of a profile of Magic Nkwashu. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly, who is intending to be our disability speaker today. He is on our call and with us. Unfortunately, he seemed to be unable to get his audio, which is why now I am reading this presentation by Magic and his team, who are in South Africa. So again, this page notes that Magic is a diversity speaker, keynote speaker, independent disability analyst, and political analyst as well, being the program director and master of ceremonies for this organization, PAS. So a little bit of a profile of Magic. Nkwashu is as a renowned international motivational speaker, presenter, facilitator, expert on disability issues, having spoken and facilitated to audiences, I guess, across Africa, or at least South Africa, being a passionate person about the rights of persons with disabilities and their integration into mainstream society, where he has a good understanding of issues affecting persons with disabilities as well as problems confronting employers. He also has a good grasp of labor law, able to communicate with people at all levels, where Mr. Nkwashu is a very enthusiastic person, always being eager to explore, and currently a disability expert and consultant of note, inspiring and motivating persons with his keynote addresses and workshops on diversity and disability worldwide, where his addresses weave personal experience with expert knowledge of persons with disabilities and their lives. So Mr. Nkwashu speaks to various serious topics, but in doing so draws personal narratives and experience that punctuate his personal presentations with honesty and humor, which we were very much hoping to hear from him today to see how he is also presenting this work in the same presentations. So this seems like we are probably at or near the end. There is a contact page here noting that to book a diversity and inclusion for your event or corporate function, and or get more information in any of the service offerings, contact them at their email, magicsnr@votomail.co.za and disabilityexperts2022@gmail.com, or call WhatsApp 072-134-1223, or Google Magic Nkwashu. So Nkwashu is spelled Nkhwashu, where there's a little note that says, "I think beyond the label. I think hiring people with disabilities is a smart move. Get the truth here." So there's a link as well to Jumbo Africa Online, where they are hosting the one-stop disability services and how to celebrate it every day in the workplace. So that link hopefully can be copied into the chat for everybody. So that ends the presentation there. So I will stop the share and open it up for anybody that would like to have a discussion now about this presentation. I think that was a very informative presentation about what's happening in especially South Africa. If it's all possible to have anyone of our guests, especially Magic, try one more time if he can have any sound at all. We would love to be able to hear from you on this call.
Hello, Prof. I don't know if I'm audible now.
Yes, you are. So you probably
thank
could have
you.
actually done your presentation.
Yes. Oh, I fiddled around somehow it worked. But thanks for having really taken care of the whole presentation. I was struggling because I'm used to connecting with my laptop, but all of a sudden it failed to connect.
Well, thanks for joining us and thanks for the wonderful presentation. We do have guests here from South Africa and around the world, but we do want to ask if you have any closing thoughts or thoughts you might like to share that Lloyd didn't have a chance to do in the presentation. So the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and really apologize to all the participants for the late arrival, but I really appreciate your patience while I was still dealing with the technicalities.
Well, I'm hoping that you can also now introduce yourself and make it something that's personal rather than just your presentation in the formal. If you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your abilities as well.
Also, there were 2 pages that we were not able to fully comprehend because you weren't there. Well, Lloyd, I'm not sure if you can bring up those pages, but it describes, I think, different maybe contribution levels or donation levels. That was not clear to us, Magic. So could you explain to us how we can engage other organizations and individuals with that? If Lloyd could be so kind as to bring up those 2 pages that we did not have clarity about.
Okay. No, thank you. Yes, my name is Magic Nkwashu. Just the name, I won't perform any tricks. Usually when I introduce myself, people think that I'll start performing some magic. Yes, I was born without a disability, but I was affected by polio when I was just about 2 years old. And since then, I have been taken to physios and all, because at the time I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything at all. So that's a bit of my background. And I started school in a mainstream school up to primary. And when I had to do high school, I went to a special school. That's where I went until I've done my matric. And then since then, I went to college thereafter. After college, that's when I started, and that college was a specialized college, which was actually taking people with various types of disabilities. And after that, I started working as a temporary worker for some chain store here in South Africa. But I also became a disability activist, seeing that there were so many challenges facing people with disabilities in South Africa. So I started my activism at the time by volunteering my service for some organizations. So I served in a vocational committee of one of the biggest organizations here in South Africa, which is actually looking after the interest of people with physical disabilities. And since when I was at that organization, I became one of the people who was representing the disability sector at the highest level. We had one umbrella body, which is called South African Federal Council on Disability, where all the organizations of and for people with disabilities were actually speaking with one voice and approaching challenges facing people with disabilities under one umbrella when engaging with government and the private sector in general. So I became one of the representatives of the organization in this umbrella body. So South African Federal Council on Disability, for some reason, because of funding, and it actually disappeared. It was a full-time, it was a structure with full-time staff that was working on a regular basis. So it disappeared. So when it disappeared, it was replaced by what we have now, which is called the South African Disability Alliance. This is a body that is having different organizations representing various disability sectors. You've got organization representing deaf, mental, you've got epilepsy, Down syndrome, you've got physical disability, quadriplegic associations. So this is the body that is currently there. So this is a structure which is not fully functional, because it has got a secretariat which is rotating amongst its members. So as a result, it's a structure which is always really complaining about not having funds to actually do its work and holding government accountable in terms of implementing what they are supposed to do. Because South Africa is one of the countries with the best policies in the whole world. From our constitution that came into force around 1996, with it came instruments such as the Integrated National Disability Strategy, which was strategically placed at the presidency level. During that time, it was Office on the Status of Disabled People, which was replicated. It was a national one at the presidency, but it was also replicated in the 9 provincial offices of the country, because we've got 9 provinces. So in the premier's offices, there were also similar offices, and also in some local municipalities, there were similar offices. But with that, with such a good policy, with such a good constitution, which has got chapter 2, it's the Bill of Rights, which is looking after the interest of the vulnerables. And such vulnerables include people with disabilities. And with that, we still see disability not being given the necessary what you call attention that they need. A lot of things are happening without people with disabilities being given the necessary consideration. Because if you look at employment as one example, we've got what we call an Employment Equity Act. And that Employment Equity Act, it's supported by the Code of Good Practice on employing people with disabilities. It also has got the Technical Assistance Guideline on employing people with disabilities. These instruments talks to both the employer and the employee, so that they are able to ensure that there is reasonable accommodation for a potential employee with a disabilities. So what we have observed is that people with disabilities remain unemployed because there are targets which have been set that any workforce that has got about 50 people or more, it must ensure that 7% of the staff complement must be people with disabilities. And the same goes with the skills development. There is a national skills development strategy, which clearly stipulates that 4% of any skills out there, whether it's learnership, whether it's internship, both government and the private sector need to ensure that it's people with disabilities. Also, when it comes to procurement, there is the preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act that requires that 5% of any procurement should be allocated to people with disabilities. So with all this instrument in place, implementation remains a problem because what you find is that people with disabilities, they are given this what we call disability grants, which is about 1,900 in terms of the disability grant that they get monthly to help them. And if you look at that amount, it hardly make any dent to a person with a disability, because as you'll realize, as well as Russia currently, things have become so expensive. I mean, COVID-19 has also brought a lot of challenges when it comes to people with disabilities. So there is a real need for government to actually look at the issues of people with disabilities. One of the challenges is that we don't have a vibrant sector, disability sector, which can advocate properly for the issues of people with disabilities. I used to work in the sector myself, as I've indicated, from around 2002 to 2007. I was a manager for advocacy and development with one of these organizations. And what I realized is that we are failing as people with disabilities. We are not united, because when we are not united, that's where we see government taking advantage by not really taking our issues seriously, especially now that we've got the white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities. And we've got South Africa as one of the signatories in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as its optional protocol. But when it comes to them observing and ensuring that the rights of persons with disabilities are taken into consideration, they are failing dismally, which brings us to where we are, why we started PAST, which is Persons with Abilities Sustainable Socio-Economic Development. This is an association that wants to try and change the current setup, because what we have realized is that if we keep on complaining without acting, without taking steps, government never listens. They actually listen to actions. We want to take advantage of the act that is there, the PEPUDA. We call it PEPUDA, P-E-P-U-D-A, which is the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act. We want to start processes that will ensure that when the rights of people with disabilities are violated by our government and the private sector, we are able to take government using that instrument to the Equality Court. So like now we've got a campaign that we are currently running. We have distributed, some messages that anyone who had their rights violated, they need to come up, and really we need to combine all these complaints, whether they are transport related, accessibility related, housing related. We just need to combine them and probably have a class action. And we are busy trying to engage so that we get lawyers who can come on board on a pro bono basis, so that we are able to take these cases up. Because we realize that if we don't act, nothing will ever happen. Remember, as a country, we are at around 28 years into our democracy. And when we look how far we have come, it looks like we have taken many steps backwards instead of progressing. A lot of things are not happening as they should to benefit people with disabilities. And when you look at people with disabilities generally in the country, and as it has been proven globally, at least 15% of the population are people with disabilities. And if we talk about South Africa, we are talking about, we are about 60 million now. So we can safely say about 5 million or so are people with disabilities. So this is the minority, the biggest minority that need to be looked at. And another thing that we need to consider and really realize is that this is a population that is growing on a regular basis. The numbers of people with disabilities are increasing on a daily basis, since there are at least only two ways that you can acquire disabilities. Either you are born with, or you can acquire it later in life. And the violence that is happening most of the time, and even the accidents, are contributing to the number of people with disabilities. So what we did as well was to form a consortium that we call it AEC. You will realize that it's AEC, but that A is actually disability. So we are trying to emphasize the ability of a person more than their disability. That's why you find it's AEC. It's actually Ability Experts Consortium. So here, it's my own company that has actually formed a partnership or a joint venture with others so that we are able to realize the economic benefits of the country. But it's also to assist both the private and the public sector to ensure that they actually achieve what is required of them when it comes to employment. We've got 9 levels where we are going to employers in the different industry. It might be mining, because mining, as an example, has been seen as the main cause of most disability, according to some research which was done. So we are targeting different sectors, the mining companies, the media, the construction companies, all industries. We are targeting them so that they need to take a package. At least they need to choose from those packages that are listed there. It's 9 packages, starting from the entry level up to the quadruple level. So they differ in amounts, and as they are packaged, they offer different solution to a possible what you call client. So we are offering the clients these packages. It's different trainings. It also includes workstation analysis. It also includes issues like accessibility audit, the ergonomics. So depending on which package a potential client chooses, these are the amounts that they can pay. For instance, if we look at the highest one, at the highest level, that one actually means that a potential employer or potential client, if he takes that one, we will spend a number of days really working in the whole company, providing sensitization workshops, ensuring that we look at their accessibility requirements, as well as capacitating employers employees with disabilities. But this program also, it's going to ensure that we collate a database of people with disabilities and capacitate them, make them ready for employment, because most of the time you find that they are not able to go to the employment of work and actually sell themselves in a convincing way. But this is the kind of program which, if employers actually take up the offerings that we have, we are going to ensure that we will really change the current status where employers haven't met what they are supposed to do. In fact, if we look, the Department of Employment and Labor are supposed to follow up on all of these things to check if the employers are really meeting their targets, but they are not doing that. One of the excuses that I've heard recently from the Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, they have indicated that they are unable to actually take action when employers, especially in the public service, are failing to meet the targets because we don't have a Disability Act. And that is a serious excuse, because we don't need to get to that level of having a Disability Act for them to ensure that employers, especially in the public service, are able to cater for the needs of people with disabilities. So that's why we are taking these drastic steps of wanting to take legal action. It's because we realize that the issues of disabilities are not taken seriously, especially since there's no capacity in the first place in that very department. If you look at the department, how it's constituted itself, it has got people with disability listed last. You've got women, you've got youth, and then you've got people with disabilities. So you can see that people with disability is an afterthought. This is happening also in many departments where there are structures such as GIODI. GIODI meaning gender, youth, and disability. So disability always comes as an afterthought. And there's just no budget, there's just no resources to ensure that something is implemented in that regard. One of the challenges, as I've indicated earlier, is that we lack a voice. We lack a voice. I'm almost the only one who have become, so I don't know how to put it, but I've always really even taken the president to task, because one of the challenges is that the ruling government, which is the ANC, they are in bed with one of the organizations, which is Disabled People South Africa. And that is the organization they are recognizing. When you see any member of parliament with a disability, most of them, they come from this very organization. It has become almost like a stepping stone to get to government, whereas when they get there, they forget about the real issues, the real challenges of people with disabilities that need to be advocated. They start serving their own interest. So I'm not popular in that regard, because I think you might have received the audio that I've sent earlier, that I was participating in a debate on SAFM, South African, one of the South African radio station called SAFM. So I'm always really trying to take risk and advocate for the rights of people with disabilities, even if it means really fighting some of our own people who have really forgotten the struggle that we are having as people with disabilities to ensure that we address the past imbalances, but we also ensure that people with disabilities get the necessary attention that they need. We are not even asking for favors. It's actually what government is expected to do. It is part of the rights that they are supposed to ensure that it benefits everyone, and that includes people with disabilities. And the fact that they have signed on the dotted line with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, they need to start doing, and what they are reporting about when they get to the UN, it must be a true reflection, not just be something on the paper. And I hope I've managed to put some more in the presentation itself, because I had the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Absolutely, this is very comprehensive.
let me ask you, Magic, do you have proven examples right now of any of these types of combo specials being put into use? Is anyone actually supporting this project?
In fact, that's where the problem is. We lack resources. We are trying to mobilize resources as part of the program. For instance, this money that we are actually charging to potential clients, it's a money, when it comes, it will be distributed. It will benefit a lot. That's why it's a consortium, it's a joint venture. For instance, out of this, my company gets 67.67%. That's what goes to my company. And then 32.33%, it goes to the broader, what you call pot, where it's going to benefit the people that are championing this program. We've got 9 champions in the 9 provinces of South Africa that are going to take a lead in each province. So it will benefit those people, but it will also benefit the programs of past, in terms of, we've got various departments. One of them, as an example, is the legal department, where when we have to take cases, we will have probably some lawyers that will actually be assisting us in taking up such cases. Some will come on a pro bono, but there might be some issues that require that we actually pop out some money from our own coffers.
Mm-hmm. So
Well,
go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, just to follow up. I know we have Heinrich here, and also Juliet from South Africa. Also, of course, as you may know, I'm here in Los Angeles. We'll be hosting in 2028 the World Olympics, but of course, there's also the Paralympics. And 2024, the Olympics will be held in Paris, and there's also the Paralympics. It sounds as though, perhaps, Magic, it might be very opportune for you to think about establishing your joint venture with organizations that are not just limited to there in South Africa, but perhaps also here in the United States and globally, because as you mentioned, South Africa is a signatory to the United Nations Convention for People with Disabilities. And if you have an interest in it, perhaps we could find a way to elevate the conversation to reach a wider audience. However, I would have to caution you that it will be just as important as describing the use of funds, even though it would seem that what you are going to be doing is much more transparent than what the government is doing, you'll be held to a higher standard. But it seems that having board participation from people such as Heinrich, for example, who is involved with mining interests, or even Lisa Anise, who here in the United States is involved with disability advocacy, could elevate this conversation to a wider audience than just this Zoom. That's part of why we're actually streaming this. So you can take parts of this and share it with your other team members. But I'll defer the floor back to you, Lloyd. Thank you so much for having this presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
as well for this, Andrew and Magic, and everybody who's on the call. As I was about to say, I think one of the things that we had done in the past, I had actually done a presentation about some of the possible solutions to creating self-employment for people with disabilities in certain sectors related to, in particular, I think the upcoming COP15 meeting that's going to be taking place in Montreal. So that is actually a conversation I would like to actually begin as well, or re-engage in a conversation around some of the solutions to self-employment for people with disabilities in sectors that I think a lot of people with disabilities may not have traditionally considered. In this case, we are, of course, promoting what we call climate smart food and other solutions, and controlled environment growing systems that may be accessible to people with disabilities and allow them to begin not just looking for employment, but actually even get to the stage where they are working and creating employment in their own communities instead of just relying on government programs or other things like that. So that is a conversation that we'd like to have as well, especially if you're going to be engaging with those corporations to have conversations around accessibility and all of the programs and learning related to ensuring that they're in compliance with the South African, in particular, in this case, mandates for the programs that have been put in place under the Constitution. So this is, I think, a good conversation to have, where we can double up or triple up our conversations around the programs we'd like to deliver to ensure that we are actually helping to implement real world local solutions for those people on the ground in our local communities of UnityNet. So again, I can follow up on
Okay.
sharing with you as well the presentation I did. I believe it was last year regarding the people with disabilities. So I'd like to know if there are any other comments or reflections today. If not, we may want to close up. We've been here for approximately an hour and a half.
Yeah, Prof, just to thanks for the words. Just to indicate that it was in 2003 when I was in Bremen, Germany, where 3 states, South Africa, the United States of America, as well as South Korea, they were comparing successes on the employment of people with disabilities under RI, which is Rehabilitation International. And, you know, since then, I haven't even had a feedback of really what was the final result. I mean, they were comparing the successes in terms of these 3 countries. But when you talk about self-employment as well, I remember when Hendrik was speaking last week around the issue of hydrogen, where there might be opportunities. I mean, our president who was in the UK, I think is still there now. He has just announced, I think they have achieved about 100 billion euro or say dollars will be invested to look at how people with disabilities can benefit out of that, because yes, there are serious challenges when it comes to energy, especially in our country, and hydrogen, it's something that is looked at as a possible solution going forward.
Yeah, so absolutely. If you would like to also join our UnityNet discussion around energy, that could be a conversation that your members could spearhead around how can people with disabilities break into that sector. Because obviously now we're moving away, hopefully, from oil and gas and toward renewables, and renewables tend to be very distributed. They need to be produced in and by the local community members and smaller, usually, companies in those communities who are installing, operating, maintaining that infrastructure for the production of these alternative energies. As we move away from oil and gas, I think there is definitely going to be a lot of attention paid to hydrogen. I know here in Canada, we had on our on our east coast, production of hydrogen from coastal seawater as well, from renewable electricity produced by wind turbines, as an example. So wherever it's windy, which I'm sure off the coast of South Africa and Africa in general, there are enormous opportunities, even in the north, in the deserts and such. I'm sure there are certain trade winds and, of course, solar as another opportunity there. And there are a number of solutions, of course, but it just needs to be deployed in a way where there are skilled people at the local level. And this is really what we're all about. And our UnityNet Unity Garden learning centers are intended to be also for training, really coordinating local community members, training them in these solutions, so they have those skills moving forward and can actually move into those realms of deploying and becoming entrepreneurs who can really be the ones to do that. And of course, we want to be able to have the ability to ensure that that people with disabilities are part of that conversation and part of that development process as well, so that we truly leave no one behind, because that is a key part of our mandate.
Thank you.
So if there's any other comments or not, we could either end the call now, or I could even continue. I actually was not even finished my opening of the upcoming events or the past events. Juliet, I invite you to unmute yourself.
Good evening and good morning to other people as well. Sorry, I was moving in between two important meetings, this one and another one, as we are preparing for 16 days of activism against women and child abuse. So apologies that I couldn't be here fully. And it's good to see my colleagues from here, South Africa. I've missed the greater part of the presentation, but I will to do is to highlight and encourage about Lawrence and and Uputi, regarding Uputi means my brother, Uput Magic, to also please pay attention to issues of women with disability, and also girl children with disability, because from the programs that we run, we find that they are the most vulnerable, particularly those who are mute, the ones who are not able to speak, because obviously the ones who are on wheelchairs and have other physical forms of disability, they are also most vulnerable. But the ones who are not able to speak are actually more in danger, because even the justice system is not able to interpret properly. So maybe going forward, if they can also look at that, just paying attention to issues of women with disability. But also just to say as a note, South Africa is, I mean, I was in a summit the whole of last week with the Department of Small Business Development. If there's one thing, South Africa is very proactive in terms of maybe encouraging people with disability to get into businesses. And also they've put strong mandates for companies to employ people with disabilities. I don't know where the challenge could have been, because I missed out, but I know that with the program that we run, there's a program we run called Putting Youth to Work. We always struggle to, not that they're not there, a lot of the young people that we try to put to work through the program are already employed. So we'll have on a database young people with disability, and normally they are the first ones who'd get employed. So I think the opportunities and the gaps is for people with disability to create employment, to get into more entrepreneurship space, form businesses, and create employment where they're able to determine how the codes of practice and everything. And I think there are more opportunities there in the creation of employment for them to be more part of the inclusive economy, you know. And that came out. There was a whole panel discussion around that. I don't know if maybe you did mention about the whole situation about saying nothing about us without us. Even in terms of business, our government is emphasizing that people with disability must be given priority in terms of grants for running their businesses, also to ensure that they're independent and they create job opportunities, you know. So, and I'm sorry if I'm mentioning something that could have been touched on. I just picked dribs and drabs, and I just thought, let me just highlight that. And I heard you speak about the Constitution, Professor Lloyd. I mean, we have a great Constitution. What is required is just people having access to the opportunities that are there, and also being realistic about what will ensure sustainable inclusivity into the economy. Because finding a job is, I don't say it's easy, it's accessible, but what will make people with disability more independent and sustainable, it would be for them to start their own enterprises. And the government, through CEDA and other programs, is very keen, and there was a program especially for people with disability. Yeah, can that also include women with disability as well, please? That's my only input. And yeah, it's good to see you, Baba and Lawrence. Thank you.
Did you wish to say a few words on that, Magic?
Thank you, sister.
Thank you. No, thank you, Julian. But I think you raised valid concern, but what you just said, I'll give it everything to Magic. Magic, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, no, thanks, sister. We really want to work in collaboration with the government. We believe that through public-private partnership, we will be able to really ensure that we meet the necessary targets as required and as stated. You raised the issue of database. That is another crucial aspect that needs to be developed. It is something that as past we are working on, because we don't have proper data in terms of people with disabilities. There is an indication in terms of the census, in terms of the statistics of people with disabilities, but we need proper data so that we are able to have and convince government to put proper budget when it comes to people with disabilities. Under small business development, the institutions such as CIFA, such as CEDA, they know about our issues. For instance, within CIFA, there is funding that is meant for entrepreneurs with disabilities. I think it's about 5 million. It's called Amavulindle, but it's so difficult to access that money by entrepreneurs with disabilities. It is there, but it's not really accessible. Most of the talks that are being made around issues of people with disabilities usually happens when it's Disability Month, which is 3 November until 3 December. And after that, until the following year, the 3rd of November, you won't hear much happening for people with disabilities. There are still stereotyping attitudes that if people with disabilities get grants, it's enough for them to survive. So this is a battle that we are still having. And the department charged with this aspect, the Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, it's actually one of the challenges that it's out there, because what you find is that most departments forget that issues of people with disabilities cut across all sectors. They start, pigeonholing issues of people with disabilities under social development. So, but we will really appreciate if we work together and then are able to show government that they need to start changing the way they operate, but also they need to strengthen the legislation so that the private sector should also come on board, because the reality is that the private sector is the one which is holding the economy. At least about 70% of the economy is in the hands of the private sector. So if government lead by example, it will follow that the private sector will also ensure that people with disabilities are employed in the private sector in accessible environment. They are also getting procurement opportunities without being given, catering and maybe cleaning services. They need to be given real opportunities that will empower them. We want to see people with disabilities who are millionaires as well, benefiting out of the economic opportunities of this country. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Magic. So I think with all of the conversations we've had today, we may want to close up our IGU Summit for this week 77 of our Indigenous Global Unity weekly Thursday events, unless there are other comments from anybody else today. If not, I do see Juliet. Do you have your hand up one more time?
Yes, it's just yes, I note what Magic said. I just want to make them aware that currently we are developed as one Soweto Council. We are developing we are working with councillors in all the areas. I know you're in Soweto as well. where we are putting together and updating our database of people with of various people entrepreneurs. We're working with the Dr. Richard Maponya Institute. So we've also included within that questions that go to the ward councillors about, because they are the ones who know who is who in each community, about the people with disability or entrepreneurs or people with disability in those areas. So what we can do is we'll communicate even further, because that's we're updating that database. Because before they used to only include people with physical disability, and they never used to include people with mental disability. So we are ensuring that that is also included. Because a lot of people have mental disability and they get ignored, but they can actually do other work. So when that study is done, I will stay in touch with you, Magic, and share some findings with you. Or when it's ready to be out, I just want to make sure that you speak to your ward councillor, that they include you, because if they're not including you in your ward, that means that ward councillor is not doing their job properly. But the study will be out soon. Dr. Richard Maponya, for everyone, is the first entrepreneur iconic entrepreneur to open businesses and big businesses, Professor Lloyd and everyone in Soweto. He's an icon. He's late now, but he's one of the biggest legends that in Soweto and South Africa we've learned from, because he started from like a small selling fat cakes in the house, and he owns one of the biggest shopping centers and other things, and he's got a training institute, and within that training institute there's an area to make sure that people with disability in entrepreneurship development are also included. But I will share that information with Magic going forward.
Okay, excellent. So hopefully we will be able to integrate what we are trying to achieve, of course, in the development of the Unity Garden Learning Centers into that model, so we can ensure that people with disabilities are also, as we always like to say, not left behind.
Definitely, Professor Lloyd. Thank you. Definitely.
So thank you all for coming on today. It is almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon here. We've been on nearly 2 hours. We had an excellent overview of the presentation at the beginning, and then Magic was able to fill in a lot more of our talking points with details about what he's actually had and experienced and how he wants to move forward. So again, Magic, thank you. Thank you again for staying on the line with us, Lisa Anise and Henrik and Laurence. Thank you for your contributions, as well as Juliet. And so we will see you all next week during this IGU Summit next week, week 78.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.